Today we will discuss some key features that you should be looking for and some things that you should avoid when shopping for outdoor and survival gear. Let's get to it. In the description, there will be timestamps for the different categories of gear that are talked about in this video. The purpose of this video is not to showcase any specific brand, but examples will be used to demonstrate the key features that you should be looking for. Now, before we talk about that, let's look at some important concepts and definitions that you should keep in mind when seeking gear that is going to meet the needs of your mission. It's important to differentiate between products which are marketed as military grade versus products which are actually mil-spec certified. Military grade is simply a marketing term used to convey to the general public that the product in question is very robust. Mil-spec or military standard, on the other hand, requires a certification process. A lot of people will reference mil-spec or military standard as being the holy grail of certifications. But what does this really mean? Well, military standard, as it turns out, doesn't mean that something is necessarily indestructible, but it means that it meets the bare minimum military standards for it to be used in operations. It's simply the most satisfactory gear for operational purposes at the lowest price available to the military. Military standard does not mean best in class. It means acceptable. The next thing to consider is practical versus tactical. Oftentimes, products will be called tactical, either a tactical knife, a tactical backpack, or even a tactical bandana. Tactical gear is meant to be purpose or mission driven. In most cases, if you don't have a militant mission, then you probably won't need it, which is not to say that certain tactical features are not useful in other contexts. For example, some tactical gear involves camouflage. There is a value in having the ability to go undetected, and to have items that deploy quickly or are modular, and the ability for all of your kit to double as some sort of self-defense tool. But for most people who are trying to put together a bug-out bag, or even just are trying to get good outdoor gear, it's likely that your situation will be less sensational. And instead of hiding from people, it's likely that you'll want to be rescued by people. Tactical isn't always strategic. Ask yourself whether or not the reasons for wanting camouflage or blacked out colors is justified. It may be that you desire to look cool, but you certainly won't look cool spending an hour looking for your stuff after you drop it in the forest. There is a very practical benefit to having high visibility gear in that you're far less likely to lose it in the field. In addition to that, a lot of tactical gear can be much heavier than civilian gear, so you may be adding weight that you don't particularly need. One of the benefits of tactical gear, however, is that it is built to last. Ultralight versus heavy-duty gear. A friend of mine once told me that you have three options: lightweight, inexpensive, and durable. Choose two. It's very rare that you're going to find a piece of gear that has all of those three things. Ultralight is great, but it also can be very delicate unless you're willing to spend a lot of money. For instance, this carbon reflex tent weighs only 13 ounces, but it's also incredibly expensive and beyond the reach of the average consumer. Most military standard equipment is not built to be ultralight. That's why military rucks can go up to 100 pounds. The benefit of having heavy-duty gear is that it's built to last a long time. A comfortable pack weight for me is up to 60 pounds. When designing a gear bag, you'll have to determine what is your allowable weight, and that is going to vary from person to person based on your fitness level, the needs of your environment, your skill level, and of course your budget. Ingress protection. Most gear has an ingress protection rating. This rating will indicate how waterproof or dustproof an item is. The first digit in the IP code refers to solid particle protection. The second refers to liquid ingress protection. Unlike military standard, there are agencies which conduct testing and provide this sort of certification to products. This means that if you see an IP rating on a brand name product, you can be confident in the reliability of the tests that were done. For example, a product with an ingress protection rating of 1 will offer very little water resistance, whereas a product that is IPX8 has a watertight seal which allows it to be fully immersed underwater for long periods of time. The same principle applies to dust. Now let's shift the discussion to talk about some key things to look for among the many classes of outdoor and survival gear. Remember, this video is going to be broken into two parts. So if there's gear that you don't see in this video, there's a good chance it will be in the next one. There are 4 main ways to make water drinkable. You could purify it with chemicals, you can filter it with a filter, you can use ultraviolet light to disinfect it, or you could boil it. One thing to note with filters is that they can get clogged. It's not recommended to use a filter if you are in murky waters and if you don't have a pre-filter system. Now this could be as simple as first running your water through something like a shirt or a bandana. And you can get filters which are back flushable to resolve this issue. But just keep that in mind that a lot of these cheap water filters on the market will get clogged with repeated use even in water which isn't that murky if you don't thoroughly pre-filter the water. If the water has a thick coloring to it, there's a good chance there's a lot of sediment in there. And that sediment will clog cheap water filters relatively quickly. Many people like chemical water filtration for its convenience, but it can have a pretty nasty aftertaste. For most backcountry environments, a bacteria or hollow fiber water filter will be sufficient. However, for an urban backpacking system, you'll want to consider a water cleaning method which gets rid of viruses. You can achieve this by boiling, ultraviolet light, purification, and even some water filters on the market will now claim to remove viruses. However, it's unlikely these filters will protect against all viruses because some viruses are simply too small to be blocked by a filter. In terms of cordage, the main cordage of choice for preppers and survivalists is of course 550 paracord. Most people have now migrated to a product called Titan Survivor Cord. Make sure that your paracord has the following certifications. It should exceed Type 3 military specification. If you don't see Mil C 5040H on the paracord, that means that it's probably not actually certified. It's also important to note the difference between dynamic and static strength. Most non-climbing cordage is measured in terms of its static strength. That means that paracord can technically hold 550 pounds, but only if there's no moving force or bouncing load or dynamic force upon it. Paracord loses almost 70% of its strength when on a bouncing load. That means if you were 100 pounds and you tried to bungee jump with paracord, you could pretty much kiss your butt goodbye. Not that you would anyways, because it has very little elasticity. It's important to note that paracord is not for climbing. Theoretically, you could use multiple strands together, which would increase its overall tensile strength. But if that weight isn't easily distributed, you could have independent strands break, and paracord is not meant to be as abrasion resistant as climbing cordages are. Now in terms of carabiners, if you're going to carry a carabiner, you might as well carry one which can actually carry you. The strength of a carabiner is measured in kilonewtons. 1 kilonewton equals 225 pounds of force. This carabiner here, for instance, is 31 kilonewtons. That means that this one little piece of metal can hold up to 6,000 pounds. Sounds pretty safe to me. This is one of the strongest aluminum carabiners in the world. Carabiners are great for securing gear to your backpack and can be useful in creating shelters at a campsite. There are 2 general types, locking and unlocking. Locking carabiners tend to be stronger, but the unlocked ones are easier to deploy in a pinch. In terms of optics, the biggest thing you're going to want to pay attention to here is the field of view. When you buy a pair of binoculars or a monocular, you're going to see 2 numbers. The first number is with regards to magnification. That is, how far it's going to let you see. The second number indicates the wideness of the field of view. The smaller this number is, the harder it is going to be for you to see, and you're likely going to need a tripod. Usually, the more magnification your optic has, the smaller the field of view necessarily will be. Therefore, it's important that you find a good balance. You may have an optic which claims to have 30 times magnification, but how big is the field of view? And how steady of a hand will you have in order for it to be effectively used at that range? What tends to happen is that the field of view becomes so small that without an incredibly steady hand, it becomes very difficult to not only focus, but keep the device steady enough to actually see what's going on. if you want to step your optics up a notch and fork out some more dough. You can get ones that come with a lot more features. Products like this one shown here, which have a built-in rangefinder, a speedometer, and Generation 0 night vision. This form of night vision requires the projection of infrared onto the environment and relies on the ambient light available to provide you with an image. Now you may consider stepping it up to real night vision or thermal vision. This is when things get really expensive. In my personal opinion though, thermal imaging has way more advantages over night vision. Thermal imagers measure heat signatures. To put in perspective, camouflage is still quite effective up against night vision. But 9 times out of 10, your camouflage is not going to mask your heat signature significantly enough that you will defeat night vision. Technically speaking, if you used a heat reflective blanket, you may be able to mask your heat signature, at least for a short period of time. But ultimately, camouflage is not going to be able to conceal your body's heat signature enough that it will go undetected by a high-resolution thermal imager. I've done an extensive video on thermal imaging that you can go and see here. In terms of multi-tools, I can only speak from personal experience, but the primary items I want on a multi-tool are a good pair of pliers, some screwdrivers, a knife, and a serrated edge. My personal favorite has always been the Leatherman brand for its balanced weight and durability. They also have a long history of making high quality products. I also like these items to have a locking feature. This is just for safety purposes. The last thing you want is to be using your multi-tool knife and for it to unexpectedly close on your hand and end up cutting you. Multi-tools like the Swiss Champ are great because they have so many different features. However, I don't like the fact that many of these tools don't lock. So I personally prefer a Leatherman over Victorinox Swiss Army knives, but it really comes down to personal preference. Whatever you do, don't rely on a cheap no-name multi-tool for something that will likely be on you all the time. You'll want to make sure that it's built strong enough to handle a lot of abuse. Now in terms of lighting fires, you have 3 methods: lighter, matches, or fire steels. There's a variety of other tools and techniques that you can use to start fires, like using a magnifying glass or a friction fire, or even a flint and steel. But these 3 are the most common technology and the most readily available products that you can use to do so. Most bushcrafters and survivalists opt for fire steels because they are more reliable and they last a lot longer, even though they require more skill to use than a lighter. There's 2 main types of fire steels. You have your ferrocerium rods, and then you have your magnesium ferro rod combos. Now some people would argue that with the magnesium rod it's a little bit easier because you can scrape off a lot of magnesium first and it's easier to light fires. I would generally agree with this. Unfortunately, with most magnesium strikers, you get a very small ferro rod which is subject to breaking or being damaged. This Mag Striker product, in my opinion, is probably one of the best because it combines the best of both worlds. You get a sizable ferro rod and a nice big chunk of magnesium that you can scrape off to help you create a fire easier and faster. Oftentimes the inexpensive ferrocerium rods that you find on Amazon are not going to throw good sparks. I'll post a link in the description for ferro rods that are guaranteed to have good striking capabilities. In terms of matches, there's a variety to choose from waterproof matches to hurricane to stormproof to Titan matches to behemoth matches, a variety of matches of all shapes and sizes that should enable you to make a fire in almost any condition. At the end of the day though, probably the easiest way to light a fire is with a lighter. The only drawback to these is that they gradually do leak fuel, and because there are moving parts, there is a risk of it breaking on you in the field. Now this problem is easily mitigated by simply carrying more lighters, but there are some advantages to matches over lighters. Many stormproof matches, just like emergency flares, will light even when they're wet, whereas a wet lighter will require that you dry it off before you can use it. There are some other drawbacks to lighters. For example, a lighter, at least a non-Zippo lighter, requires you to hold on to it while lighting the fire. However, there may be a situation where you want your ignition source to function independently of your having to hold a button. To be honest, if you're intent on putting a lighter in your bug-out bag, put a barbecue lighter in there. This will give you the length from the flame that you need to light a fire in almost any configuration. If you want more information on campfire setup, check out my video I did on the topic here. There's also a new class of lighter on the market that uses electricity. The benefit to this is that so long as you have a renewable energy source like a solar panel, you could potentially have an unlimited ignition source. Because unlike a lighter or a match, it doesn't rely on a non-renewable combustible fuel source. The main drawback of this is that sophisticated technology like it can fail. Thus, if you plan on putting one of these in your bug-out bag, you'll probably want to bring a ferrocerium rod just in case. In part 2 of this video, we will explore the following types of survival gear: sleep systems including cots, tents, and sleeping bags, radio communications, portable power supplies and off-grid renewable energy sources, backpacking systems, navigation, cookware and cooking systems, knives, saws, and first aid equipment, insect repellents, and survival literature. So stay tuned for that video coming next Sunday. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Canadian Prepper out. The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com. Your one-stop shop for premium, high-quality, brand-name products that have been tried and tested by myself and other YouTube gear reviewers. My subscribers save 10% off by using the coupon code SURVIVALPREPPER. All one word in all caps.